Joseph.
Joseph it is on line 1. You've been waiting for a while in New York. Thanks so much for waiting. You're on with Jenna and Matt.
Hello, Joseph.
Hi.
Hi.
Jenna?
What's going on?
Jenna and Matt?
Yes, sir.
Guys? So, I have a story that, by the way, how much time do I have? Because, I mean, this has been going on for a long time.
Well, there's only 13 minutes left in the show, and there's 4 other callers waiting, and then we're going to go to Discord afterwards. So we'll try and go through it fairly quickly, but I can't tell you how much time you have because I could get irritated and hang up quickly, or we might run the show long. So let's just get to it.
Well, that's one thing I'm hoping you don't do, that you don't get irritated and hang up quickly, because I have a story that demonstrates what God is and what he does. And, it's a very interesting story.
Well, let's get to it. Because the story about the story is never going to be as interesting.
The story of the story.
Tell me your story so that we know what God is and what God does.
Right. I hope you don't hang up on me, though, because, I mean, the representative...
I'll make you a deal. Jenna will be in charge of hanging up on you if that becomes the case. I will hands off. Just please get to it.
All right. Okay, so I used to be a cross-country runner, track runner, track and field. And my brother was also a runner. And so my dad... he took us to a gymnasium in the summer so that we could do strength training. And at this gym, there was this guy. There was this tall old man. His name was Bill. And he would say things to us. He would say, and I swear that this is his voice. He said to my brother Dave, he said, "You're my little angel." And he said to both of us, he said, "You boys are such handsome devils."
Okay.
Can I ask something real quick, Joseph?
Yeah.
Does your dad or your brother or Bill tell us anything about what God is or what God does?
No.
Then learn to tell a better story. Get to telling me about what God is, what God does, and how you know it.
I know, but you have to. This is the details of this story matter. So Bill.
I'll put a bet on that against somebody in the YouTube chat. But go ahead.
Bill was obviously gay, and so in the locker room, we would go in the locker room, me and my brother, to go swimming. And
you swam in the locker room?
Let him get to his story.
I'm sorry.
We're trying to get through the
I'll
story.
shut up.
Come on, Joey.
So we would be in the aisle, one of the aisles of lockers, locker aisles that have, benches on them, in them. And Bill would walk past the aisle and look at us, and he would just go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Like, "Bill, do you have any destination? What are you doing?"
Hey, Joseph, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
What's the point to this story? Like, what are you getting at?
God answered one of my prayers, and he did it in a very profound way.
Okay.
What was the prayer? What was the prayer?
Oh man, I want to say that at the end. It's at the end of the story.
No, it's
We're just
right fucking now.
We're
What
a little
was
short
the prayer?
on time, so can we just summarize, please?
All right, I prayed to God. I said to him, and this is the most intense prayer of my entire life.
I don't
Okay,
care. I
what
want to know
was the
what
prayer?
it was.
What? I'm sorry, what?
What was the prayer? This is really simple, Joseph. I want to know what the prayer is, what the answer was, and how you know that it was God that answered it. That's it. That is how you construct an argument for something, not whether or not Bill was gay or whatever else. What was the prayer? What was the answer? And how do you know God answered it?
And if you don't know, you don't know. It's okay.
No.
Okay.
I prayed to God intensely, sincerely, absolutely sincerely, that I wanted to, I was a runner, so I could run very far.
What did you want to do, Joseph?
I wanted to see a girl naked in her window.
Okay. And then what happened?
And so I prayed to God. I said, God, I love this girl.
Okay.
I loved her for 7 years. I want to see her naked. I can't stop myself. I cannot stop myself. I want to run to her house.
Okay, so what happened?
At night.
Uh-huh.
Well, this is where I was, I was trying to tell you the story the way that I wanted to tell it.
Well, but we just kind of want to get to the bullet points of it because we're so short on time. Okay? So you
Right, look,
you asked God.
So, all right, here I think I can be quick, all right?
Thank you.
Bill wanted to see me and my brother naked.
Okay.
And I did not want Bill to see me naked, but he found a way to see me naked. And when he did, I knew that he saw me naked. And I felt raped.
Okay.
I felt raped. I was trembling. After this guy saw me naked. And so I asked my dad, why would God let this happen to me? And my dad said, maybe female spirits were mad at you. And when he said that, I remembered my prayer to God, which was that I wanted to see this girl naked. And if I...
So you thought that because you wanted to see a girl naked, that's why you were sexually assaulted? Right.
That's
what you think?
That's what I think.
Why would you think that?
Look, listen, okay? God showed me. He showed me how painful it is to be seen naked by a frickin' pervert.
Okay, Joseph.
It was so painful.
Joseph.
What?
It sounds to me like you're having a really hard time, and I completely understand if you are. I'm going to ask you personally to seek out help from the Secular Therapy Project, from Recovering from Religion, from 911, anything that you can do to get help for yourself, because it sounds like you're struggling, and I care about you, okay? I want you to know that there's a possibility that these two instances are completely separate, okay? If this is the reason that you believe in a God is because it taught you a lesson, I wouldn't say that. I would say that something bad happened to you, and now it's time to help yourself, to take care of yourself if you can. But when it comes to seeing other people naked, and maybe you did learn a lesson that it's not right to invade other people's privacy. But what does?
Well, let me be as straightforward as I can be. Everybody with any sense of decency and understanding of boundaries and privacy and proper, healthy sexual relationships, when you said that you prayed to God to see a woman naked, immediately thought you were a creep. You were. You then recognized later on when you ran into another creep, and whether or not they're homosexual or whatever else doesn't matter, creepy sexual assault and things like that, that's not a matter of sexuality, which is another lesson you should have learned as you were wanting to see a girl naked and he wanted to see a boy naked. But you learned a lesson. It's a valuable lesson that your baser instincts about your sexual desires, about what you want, are completely independent of what you should do. I've seen plenty of naked women. I've seen naked men. I've wanted to see people naked. But what I do to achieve that needs to follow certain prescriptions. You know, you learned a lesson. You were sexually assaulted, at least in the sense of being ogled without your permission, consent, and without your desire, and it left you shaken, and you learned a lesson from it. The problem here is that you decided, with no evidence, that this was God teaching you a lesson. God looked at you and said, you filthy sexual pervert, you have given yourself over to your lust and desires, and now I'm going to show you what it feels like. And while that's certainly a valuable lesson, you have no reason to think that there was a God guiding this lesson. And it brings into character the question of that God, because I can teach someone how to exercise empathy, how to understand boundaries, how to value consent without actually violating theirs. This is the same type of thinking, like if I get ill, there are Christians, including people in my family, who will look at any illness I get as if it is God punishing me for speaking out against God. And yet, you know, when something bad happens to them, it's the devil persecuting them. It's not God necessarily punishing them. We talked about this a little bit kind of at the top of the show. You were a vulnerable kid, and you experienced something nobody should experience, and you definitely should seek counseling over that, because I'm guessing that this happened quite a long time ago. I'm guessing, you know, it wasn't like last week or something, given the age.
I don't need counseling. I don't.
Okay.
I love Bill.
Okay.
I like Bill.
This
Bill.
isn't about whether or not you love Bill or like Bill. This is about listening to you. I'm not a therapist, but I'll bet if I got one on the phone, they would talk about the way you tried to go about telling the story, the way you laughed nervously and where you laughed nervously, the points at which you started to break down, the point at which you talked about how you felt you had been raped. These are all things that indicate to me that you are still struggling with this, not the least of which is that you thought that there was an all-powerful governing figure of the universe that decided to teach you a lesson. Now, one thing is, for young cisgender heterosexual boys, the desire to see a naked woman is natural. You are not the only person who prayed to God to let him see a naked person. You're not the only person who reached out to a God with some sort of sexual desire. And as a kid, that's not necessarily a huge problem. The problem is in what lessons you take away from that. It's the natural desires that humans have aren't wrong. It's the actions they take on behalf of those desires that are wrong. You learned a lesson.
I want to address, though, that there's nothing wrong with seeking help and getting counseling. I want you to know that I just saw my third therapist this morning, trying a new therapist. Like, I'm seeing therapist. It's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean that you're broken. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It means that you're able to ask for help, and that's huge.
At the end of the day, I'm glad we got to the elements of the story. I hope that someday you figure out that these don't in any way indicate a God, as if there was, you prayed for something and essentially something bad happened afterwards and it taught you a lesson. Things happen and you can learn lessons from them without them necessarily being from a God. But what kind of God looks at the natural sexual desires of, how old were you at the time?
It's probably 22.
Okay. That's considerably older than I would have guessed. So that indicates something that I would consider a little more problematic than, somebody entering puberty. But the natural desires that people have, and then deciding to do one of the worst things or in a pool of one of the worst potential things you can do to somebody else in order to teach them a lesson, is a God that is weak and feeble and incapable of communicating. Because I can easily teach a 22-year-old about what it would be like to have to experience something like that merely as a thought experiment without it actually happening in such a way that it might traumatize them for years. There are ways to teach and learn lessons that don't involve smacking, figuratively or literally. Now, there's no reason to think that there's a God that answered your prayer this way. I'm glad that you've made your peace with Bill. It's up to you whether or not you get counseling. I'm in disagreement with you about whether or not you'd benefit from it, but it's your life. But at the end of the day, if you think this is what God is and what God does, not only do you not have anything beyond your own suspicion that this is what God is and what God does, but I don't see it as any sort of valuable, good, or useful God.
Yeah, I mean...
How are you feeling right now?
I'm feeling okay. I'm feeling good.
Okay, that's good. Do you have any questions?
No, I don't. I don't have any questions.
Okay. Well, I am glad you called, and I'm glad that we were able to work through this. I'm not going to retract my initial stuff. You know, your brother and your dad and all that. If you're going to make an argument for here's why God exists, it really is just, if you think it was because of answered prayer, it's what was the prayer, how was it answered, and how do you know that it was God that it was answered? That's the step of the story. I think that you didn't call in so much to try to demonstrate the proof of God, because I think you're reasonable enough to realize that even if this convinced you, it certainly isn't confirmation for anybody else of who God is or what God was. I think you just, and this is just me, I can be wrong, seemed like you wanted to tell this story. And that's one of the reasons, in addition to the mannerisms that we heard over the phone, that both of us were suggesting getting some sort of counseling about this, because we've dealt with people in our own lives and on the show who are suffering long-term trauma from events that happened in the past. And your story and your mannerisms bear some of those hallmarks. We're not experts. We could be wrong. Maybe you are absolutely fine. We're just telling you what we got out of it.
I can assure you I am absolutely fine.
Okay, that's totally fine.
Okie doke.
Thank you so much for calling. I hope that everything goes all right with you, and I hope that maybe you can find a different argument to use next time, okay?
Okay.
I hope you're doing good. I hope you're okay.
All right. Well, thank you.